Hello everybody, it's Nick again, and today I want to discuss the second lecture, Old Rus Principalities in the 12th, early 13th centuries. First of all, I would like to discuss feudal fragmentation and formation of the three political centers. Vladimir Suzdal Principality, Galitska-Volyn land, and Novgorod and Pskov lands. Feudal fragmentation is a stage in the development of the certain feudal state, in which it is split into small region-state structures, each characterized by significant autonomy, if not outright independence, and ruled by a high-ranking noble, such as a prince or a duke. Feudal fragmentation is usually associated with European history, particularly during the Middle Ages. In the history of Russia, the period of fragmentation, раздробленность, lasted from around the 12th or 13th century, in particular the fall of Kievan Rus after the Mongolian invasion of Rus, to 1547, the year of ascension of Ivan IV or Terrible to the throne of Muscovite Russia. The Council of Lubech was one of the best documented princely meetings of Rus that took place in Lubech, today the Chernihiv Oblast of Ukraine, in 1097. The council ended the war between the ruling Grand Prince Svetopolk II and the Prince of Chernigov Oleg, who fought for heritage of his father, the Grand Prince Sviatoslav II. Another session followed in Vitichev, near Kiev, on August 1100, known as the Council of Uvetichi. The council, initiated by Vladimir Monomach, brought together Svetopolk II, Iziaslav, Vasilko Rostislavich, David Sviatoslavich, Oleg Sviatoslavich, and the other Rus princes. It aimed to stop the fraternal war, to pacify the people, and to present a united front against Polovtsi. It resulted in the discussion of Kievan Rus among the princes, letting their immediate families inherit them. This broke a rota system, Lesvichное право, that had been followed in Kievan Rus for 2 centuries. The council confirmed the principalities as follows. Svetopolk II received Kiev, Turov, Pinsk, and the title of Grand Duke. Vladimir Monomach received Pereslav, Rostov-Suzdal lands, Smolensk, and Beloozero. His son Mstislav received Novgorod the Great. Oleg, David, and Yaroslav, both sons of Sviatoslav II of Kiev, Grand Prince of Kiev from 1073 till 1076, received Chernigov, Tmutarkhan, Ryazan, and Murom. Of the remaining Izgoy, outlaw princes, David Igorovich received Volyn, Volodymyr Volynski, Volodar Rostislavich received Peremyshel, Vasilko Rostislavich received Teropol. These changes effectively established a feudal system in Kievan Rus. It stopped the struggle for Chernigov. After the death of Svetopolk in 1113, the citizens of Kiev revolted and summoned Monomach to the throne. Nevertheless, a new dispensation allowed other principalities to consolidate their power and to develop as powerful regional centers, most notably Galicia, Volhynia, and Vladimir Suzdal. After the Council of Lubech in 1097, Kievan Rus entered a feudal period and was divided into principalities ruled by the Rurikid family's princes, who were in a constant power struggle with each other. Major principalities were Galicia, Volhynia, Kiev, Chernigiv, Pereslav, and others. In the period of 1240 till 1362, the three latter ones were forced to accept the Golden Horde's overlordship. By the end of the 20th century, 12th century, the fall of Kievan Rus became apparent due to inter-princely strife and Polovetskian raid. The population left Kiev. There are three centers of the state life. The first center is Galician Volhynian land. The second center is Vladimirskaya or Rostov-Suzdal land. The third center is the Novgorod and Pskov feudal republics. While Kiev was in decline, these lands grew rich and attracted their population. So in Novgorod, the Great developed Vecha government, which led to the creation of feudal republic. In Vladimir, the prince's autocratic power grew. A very strong influence was received by the boyars in Galich. Consider state administration in each of these principalities. First of all, a state and the socio-political system of Vladimir Rostov-Suzdal land or Vladimir Suzdalian Rus. We mean by the name of Vladimir Suzdal Principality or northeastern Russia, this region located between Okha on the one hand and Volga on the other. Until the end of the 11th century, this eastern outskirts of Kievan Rus was a deaf and poorly populated region. At the end of the 11th century, Suzdal land stood out in a special principality. By agreement of princes, it was given to Vladimir Monomarch, who began to arrange it for his youngest son, Yuri Dolgoruki, or Yuri the Long-Armed. Construction of such cities as Tver, Kostroma, Nizhny Novgorod, and others began from that time. The influx of Russian settlers intensified here. The nature of Vladimir Suzdal land was different from both Kiev and Novgorod. There was no fat black earth, but there was no stony soil. Nature allowed to engage in agriculture and forestry. Suzdal princes become the most powerful in entire Russian land. Yuri Dolgoruki had a strong influence here. He wanted to add as many neighboring principalities as possible, for which he received such a nickname. His role in the construction of the city's Suzdal Principality is great. His son Andrei the Bogolubsky, or Andrei the Pious, developed the city of Vladimir, erected the Assumption Cathedral in it. Andrei Bogolubsky saw to autocracy, not only in Suzdal Principality, but throughout the Rus land. The Vladimir Principality grew up and became one of the large feudal states of Europe, widely known outside of Rus, with another son, Yuri Dolgoruki, Vsevolod the Big Nest, who was called so because of the fact that he had many children. The development of feudal relation in the Vladimir Suzdal Principality was a subject to the regularity of the feudal development. A significant increase in large land tonnage and the struggle of the feudal lords for the land of the peasants, reduction of the free peasants communes, and the emergence of new groups of feudal dependent people strengthened as the link between land ownership and political power. Vassals depends with the feudal class the presentation of immunity privileges to the boyar's patrimony or votchinas. The social-political development of Rostov-Suzdal land was significantly difficult from the Russian lands. Here later, when in the other regions of Russia, the feudal relationship began to develop. The princely power was formed later, but I consider that it was not such very interesting for many people. As you know, here later than in the all Russian region of Russia, feudal relation began to develop. The princely power was formed later, but it was strong. It had huge land holdings. The princes distribute their land to the warriors and servants, turning them into service boyars who formed as the support for the prince. The growth of the new cities by the 12th century, such as Moscow, Yaroslavl, Zvenigarod, and Dmitrov, is another important fact for the strengthening of the princely power. Rely on the squads, the courtyards, and the growing cities, the princes suppressed all the opposition of the old Rostov-Suzdal boyars and strengthened their powers. However, after the death of Vsevolod the Big Nest, the disintegration of the Vladimir Principality began. In such status, it was called by the Tatar Mongols. Rostov-Suzdal Principality was one of the first conquered in the process of the Tatar-Mongol invasion. But it was here the prerequisites for the unification of Russian began to ripen earlier and faster than others. It was characteristic for Vladimir Suzdal principality. Possession of princely patrimonies domains, hereditary land tenure by right of ownership. The second, the supreme power of the prince in his principality over large land fiefdoms, over the villages, cities, and of the principality. The third, creation of palace lands by merging the princess estates with the state lands. Another category of feudal lords, the boyars. It is typical for them. Vassal dependence on the prince, his military service, the presence of the boyars in the ownership of the land estates, which were formed as a result of princely awards and the capture of communal lands. The third, the presence of the boyar's right to break official relations with the prince at his discretion while maintaining the patrimony. The fourth, development of immunities, the liberation of the boyar's estate from princely taxes and duties. Fifth, the boyars have their own vassals in the face of medium and small feudal lords. Sixth, the boyars have the right to independently manage the population of the possessions. The boyars were obliged to perform military service for the Vladimir princes, and they were granted the right to freely transfer from the prince to another. A new class of feudal lords, the nobles, arose in the second half of the 12th century in the Vladimir Suzdal Principality. At first, it was the lower social group of the feudal class, which was characterized by the following features. First, carrying military and another service for the prince by the nobles. Second, due to the service, the nobility receives their impoverishment for land and for the exploitation of the peasants. Third, the property of the nobleman of the ground was conditional and lost in the case of his termination of service. Fourth, the nobles lacked the right of free transition from one prince to another. Spiritual feudal lords were an important category of feudal class in Vladimir Suzdal land. Church monastic landed property arise from the princely grants. Land contributes of the boyars, the capture of the peasant communal lands by the monasteries and churches. The peasant class also united various categories of peasants, differing in their legal status. The peasant carried duties in form of natural duties, labor and or corvée or barshina, and the state duties. The dependent peasants in Vladimir Suzdal land had the right to move from one feudal lord to another. They were obliged to pay the debt then living. The urban population of Vladimir Suzdal land consisted of artisans, merchants, white clergy. It had the right to marry black clergy without the right to marry boyars and another. The urban population of the Vladimir Suzdal Principality was divided into the best upper layer and black lower layer of people. According to its state system, in the 12th, 13th century, the Vladimir Suzdal Principality represents the early feudal monarchy. The appanage princes became independent from the Grand Prince or Duke as the heads of the feudal domains in connection with the growth of independence in the 13th century. These princes claimed the title of Grand Princes and that had their own Grand Principalities. The Grand Duke of Vladimir Suzdal Principality was the bearer of supreme power. He belonged to the legislative, executive, regulatory, judicial, and even ecclesiastical authorities. The governing body of Vladimir Suzdal Principality was the council under the prince, Veche and feudal congresses. The princely council included the most powerful representatives of the feudal class, the sovereign boyars devoted to the prince. Veche was convened to address the most important issues of domestic and foreign policy. Feudal Congress were convened in emergency situation on the initiative of Grand Duke. The squad or druzhina, which consists of the sovereign boyars and princely servants, was an instrument for the implementation of princely power. The basis of administration in Vladimir Suzdal Principality was the palace patrimonial administration. Its essence was the center of administration, which was a prince's court, and the administration of patrimony was not limited to the general government. Local administration was in the hands of governors or of volosters, who were representative of the Grand Duke on the ground and exercised all the functions of administration in the province. The legal basis of Vladimir Suzdal land was a system of the state administration of all Rus state. This system was reflected in the Russian truth and was used here more actively than in another principalities of Rus. The significance of Vladimir Suzdal Principality for the history of Russia lies in the fact that Moscow arose on its territory, which later became the center of Russian lands and the capital of Russian centralized state. The first mention of Moscow in Russian chronicles date back to 4th April 1147. Another state administration of Galicia-Volyn land. The Principality of Galicia-Volyn or Kingdom of Ruthenia. The Volyn and Galician land became to develop and grow for each with the development of the Vladimir Suzdal Principality in the southwest of Rusland, which in 1200 merged into one strong Galitska-Volyn Principality. Volyn land with the center in the city of Vladimir Volyn got its name for the ancient tribe of Volyn. From ancient times, Volyn land was subordinated to the Kiev princes. The grandson of Vladimir Monomach was Roman Mstislavovich, who ruled here. He also captured Galician Principality next to Volyn, located on the eastern slopes of the Carpathians and along the Buk River in the middle of the 12th century. Over time, in the city, Galich became the economic and political center of Galicia-Volyn land, a distinctive feature of which was fertility-rich land. The position of Galicia-Volyn land was more dangerous than the situation in Suzerland, since Volyn and Galich were not in the center but on the border of Rusland and have as their neighbors Poles, Lithuanians, Ugrians, and also Polovices, strong enemies. In addition of peculiarity of the social life, Volyn and Galich consisted in fact that there were boyars who confront with the prince as well as a prince retinue or дружина. The Veche in this principality occupied really a negligible place in the princes had to reckon with the boyars. The boyars acquired destructive power here, and the feuds of the princes with the boyars weakened the state. The urban population of the Galicia-Volyn land was not numerous. The bulk of the rural population depends on the boyars. The exploitation of the peasants here was much stronger than in the other lands. The peculiarity of the Galician-Volyn land system was that it was not divided in two fiefdoms or votchinas for a long time. The highest authority here were the prince, the council of boyars, and the Veche. The leading role in the political life of Galicia-Volyn land was played by the boyars. The most important body of the boyars was the Boyarsky Council, or Duma, which played a formal role. Principality system of the palace administration was created in Galicia-Volyn. There earlier than in the other lands, influential officials appeared: butler, horseman, and also printer. All Galicia-Volyn land was divided into voivodeship, headed by the governors appointed from the boyars. Provinces boyar were called smaller boyars in rural areas. Such boyars were in the volosts. Prince was calling on by the power of Boyar Duma. The Galician-Volyn principality did not leave a single strong state, the reason of which was, on the other hand, the border position of the principality, the influence of Poland and Lithuania, and on the other hand, the invasion of Mongol Tatars. After the enormous destruction wreaked by the Mongol invasion of Rus in 1239 to 1241, Prince Danilo Romanovich was forced to pledge allegiance to Batu Khan of the Golden Horde in 1246. He strove to rid his realm of the Mongol yoke, however, by a formal orientation to the West Europe. Coronation as the Rex Russia by a Pope legate in 1233, and by trying unsuccessfully to establish military alliances with the European rulers. By the 13th century, the kingdom was weakened in internecine conflict and was conquered. On the one hand, by the Poles, they occupied Galicia. On the other hand, by Lithuanians, they occupied Volhynia. In the 14th century, Galicia-Volhynia Principality ceased to exist completely. The Polish conquest of the kingdom in 1349 ended its vassalage to the Golden Horde. Now I would like to tell about Novgorod and Pskov feudal republics. Novgorod feudal republic existed in the period from 1136 to 1478 in the northwest of Rus. And a republican form of government existed in Pskov from 1348 to 1510. Lord Novgorod the Great consisted of 5 districts, which were called 5 Eds. Accordingly, the whole Novgorod land was divided into 5 provinces, called the Petini. These 5 provinces constitute as a vast territory of Novgorod land from Lake Onega to Volga. The lands along the northern Dwina, Pechora, and Vyatka rivers also belong to the Novgorod lands. The owner of all these possessions was Novgorod the Great, Великий Novgorod, as it was called the elder city with its entire free population. Novgorodians called their land the land of Hagia Sophia, or Holy Sophia, by the name of the main Novgorod temple. Subordinate to Novgorod cities were fortresses that were supposed to protect the city in the even of the attack by enemies, by Germans, Swedes, the Danes, and another. Such fortress cities were Pskov, later separated from Novgorod, Izborg, Stara Russa, Ladога. All Novgorod land was barren, stony, covered with swamps. Therefore, the people of Novgorod imported most of the goods from the eastern and western neighbors. It is characteristic that they brought bread from the Volga region to Novgorod, and in exchange sold goods that they purchased from their western neighbors, furs, honey, flax. This mediation allowed to concentrate capital in the hands of the local nobility. The government and administration of Novgorod was shaped by the popular Veche. The Veche elected a prince and later taken advantage of the feuds of Kiev princes. Veche began to elect a sovereign, that is archbishop, although until the 12th century. The Kiev metropolitan sent the archbishop at his discretion. Having achieved such an order, Novgorod received complete independence and isolation, and became an independent state. Their supreme power belonged to Veche. The prince was deprived of the right to acquire land in Novgorod. Novgorod allotted land to him as a rule on the Volga. For his service, the prince received gifts or tribute in exactly the right amount. In electing the prince, the Novgorod Veche entered into a treaty or serious ryad with him. Prince of Novgorod was the highest government authority. He led the Novgorod army, was the supreme judge and ruler. However, as a person outside Novgorod, the prince lived not in the city itself, but 3 versts or miles from it, near the lake Ilmeni. The prince promises to rule Novgorod without changing the laws and customs of Novgorod. and with the constant participation of the Posadnik, the mayor, elected by Veche. Posadnik accompanied the prince to war, was present at the princely court together with the prince and appointed officials. Posadnik in Novgorod was in charge of civil affairs, and Tisetsky was the leader of the militia. The Sotskis, the commander of 10 and hundreds, obeyed Tisetsky and constitute a thousand. Each of the 5 townlands had Konchatsky headmen. 200 militiamen were excavated from each city end. The Novgorod Vladika, archbishop, not only was in charge of church affairs, but also played a large role in the political life of Novgorod. He headed the government council, consisting the boyars, monitored the activities of Veche. Every decision of Veche required the blessing of Vladika, spiritual lord. Vladika fastened the letters of agreement with foreigners by his seals. Vladika was the keeper of the state treasure, and the state archive was kept in the courtyard of the Vladika near the Sofia Cathedral. He had his own staff of officials and even his own regiment, which was separate from the Novgorod militia. Vladika was a large landowner. Veche in Novgorod was the highest state authority, issued decisions and empowered officials acting in the contracts with foreigners on behalf of the Feudal Republic. In addition to the Veche, there was a council lord, including the boyars and Vladika, Prince, Posadnik, and Tisetsky, the whole lord of militia. The population of Novgorod and its lands was divided into 2 groups, the best people and the young people. The first group was boyars, rich people and good merchants. Boyars were officials and aristocrats. Less bureaucratic but rich people were called rich people, жити люди. All poor people were called young people. They were small traders, craftsmen, and workers within the city limits. In the provinces, smert, peasants, and polovniks, farm laborers working for the master from a half of the harvest, were called young people. The smert lived in the yard, and the polovniks, who were many in Novgorod land, in the position were approaching slaves. The history of Novgorod is a constant strife and the troubles. The boyar council led political power in its hand, and by pressing of the poor, it conducted the necessary decisions through the assembly, Veche. Veche turned against the boyars, and then the poor people began to beat and rob the best people. Internal contradictions led to the fall of the Feudal Republic. Novgorod began to look for allies in order to preserve their independence. It ruined Novgorod because the boyar wanted to know an alliance with Lithuania against Moscow, and the poor people wanted alliance with Moscow against Lithuania. Civil strife ended with the conquest of Novgorod by Muscovy in 1478 and the annexation of all its lands. Pskov was the largest suburb of Novgorod. Initially, it consisted of a small fortress, Detinets, and then turned into the powerful fortification having 12 fortresses. The main cathedral of Pskov was called the Cathedral of Holy Trinity, and had for Pskov the same meaning as the Cathedral of the Saint Sophia for Novgorod the Great. Pskov was divided into the 6 ends, with, as in Novgorod, had the special control. The system of fortification was necessary of the western border of Rus. Since Pskov stood at the turn of Rus alongside Lithuania and Germans. Having grown rich and in trade, Pskov came out of obedience of Novgorod, and in 1348 gained independence. There were the same political bodies in Pskov and Novgorod. The main authority was the Council of Lords. Just as in Novgorod, the princes were formally limited in their power. Although in the fact the assembly was supervised by the boyars. An important role in Pskov played Posadnik, the head of townsman or mayor. The Veche of Pskov was more peaceful than in Novgorod. There was no sharp property inequality of the inhabitants, and therefore there were no sharp contradictions. An example of political system of Pskov is the Pskov Juridical Charter. You can find a lot of articles in the document that govern the relationship between landowners and the feudal dependent population, izorniks, farmers, gardeners, and kochetniks, fishermen. The izorniks worked for a half of the crop and gave another half to the landowner. They had the right to leave the owner only on the 26th of November, returning the assistance of credit in silver or in goods. Thus, the Pskov Juridical Charter is a monument of legislation. The development on feudal relations, the growth of the class contradictions, the strengthening of the protection of property of feudal lords and merchants led to increase criminal repressions for stealing, theft of church property, which was punished by a death. Among the serious crimes, the Pskov Juridical Charter also mentioned such as perivet, the treason, bribe to the judge, secret promise of assault, invasion into the court building, and another. Now I want to discuss the state structure and administration in the second half of the 12th, the beginning of the 13th century. At the beginning of the period of feudal fragmentation, there were 3 main political centers: Vladimir Feudal Principality, Galicia-Volyn Principality, and Novgorod Republic. The highest authority, the Grand Duke, the sovereign ruler. The central administration was represented by the prince, his palace, and the patrimonial administration, and the Boyar Duma. The local government is the governor, Volostil, Virnik. Inter-principality governing bodies all Russian and land congresses. Novgorod aristocratic republic. Prince was a link between Novgorod and Rus, and with the lands of the republic, solved the issues of protection of Novgorod from external enemies, was the highest court. Vladika is the church representative of the highest power and the keeper of the treasury. Tyshechki led the militia, the supreme authority of the all ends Veche, city assembly of free citizens. Posadnik ruled the city. Low level of administration, unification of neighbors. Urban areas and self-governing territorial, administrative and political units. I hope that this lecture was very nice for you. Thank you.